السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. واعلموا أنما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل إن كنتم آمنتم بالله وما أنزلنا على عبدنا يوم الفرقان يوم التقى الجمعان والله على كل شيء قدير. إذ أنتم بالعدوة الدنيا وهم بالعدوة القصوى والركب أسفل منكم ولو تواعدتم لاختلفتم في الميعاد ولكن ليقضي الله أمرا كان مفعولا ليهلك من هلك عن بينة ويحيى من حي عن بينة وإن الله لسميع عليم. إذ يريكهم الله في منامك قليلا ولو أراكهم كثيرا لفشلتم ولتنازعتم في الأمر ولكن الله سلم إنه عليم بذات الصدور. وإذ يريكموهم إذ التقيتم في أعينكم قليلا ويقللكم في أعينهم ليقضي الله أمرا كان مفعولا وإلى الله ترجع الأمور. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا لقيتم فئة فاثبتوا واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وأطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تنازعوا فتفشلوا وتذهب ريحكم واصبروا إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تكونوا كالذين خرجوا من ديارهم بطرا ورئاء الناس ويصدون عن سبيل الله والله بما يعملون محيط. وإذ زين لهم الشيطان أعمالهم وقال لا غالب لكم اليوم من الناس وإني جار لكم فلما تراءت الفئتان نكص على عقبيه وقال إني بريء منكم إني أرى ما لا ترون إني أخاف الله والله شديد العقاب. إذ يقول المنافقون والذين في قلوبهم مرض غر هؤلاء دينهم ومن يتوكل على الله فإن الله عزيز حكيم. ولو ترى إذ يتوفى الذين كفروا الملائكة يضربون وجوههم وأدبارهم وذوقوا عذاب الحريق ذلك بما قدمت أيديكم وأن الله ليس بظلام للعبيد. كدأب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كفروا بآيات الله فأخذهم الله بذنوبهم إن الله قوي شديد العقاب. ذلك بأن الله لم يكن مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وأن الله سميع عليم. كدأب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كذبوا بآيات ربهم فأهلكناهم بذنوبهم وأغرقنا آل فرعون وكل كانوا ظالمين. إن شر الدواب عند الله الذين كفروا فهم لا يؤمنون. الذين عاهدت منهم ثم ينقضون عهدهم في كل مرة وهم لا يتقون. فإما تثقفنهم في الحرب فشرد بهم من خلفهم لعلهم يذكرون. وإما تخافن من قوم خيانة فانبذ إليهم على سواء إن الله لا يحب الخائنين ولا يحسبن الذين كفروا سبقوا إنهم لا يعجزون وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم وما تنفقوا من شيء في سبيل الله يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون وإن جنحوا للسلم فاجنح لها وتوكل على الله إنه هو السميع العليم وإن يريدوا أن يخدعوك فإن حسبك الله هو الذي أيدك بنصره وبالمؤمنين وألف بين قلوبهم لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم إنه عزيز حكيم يا أيها النبي حسبك الله ومن اتبعك من المؤمنين يا أيها النبي حرض المؤمنين على القتال إن يكن منكم 20 صابرون يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 100 يغلبوا 1000 من الذين كفروا بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون الآن خفف الله عنكم وعلم أن فيكم ضعفا فإن يكن منكم 100 صابرة يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 1000 يغلبوا 2000 بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين ما كان لنبي أن يكون له أسرى حتى يثخن في الأرض تريدون عرض الدنيا والله يريد الآخرة والله عزيز حكيم لولا كتاب من الله سبق لمسكم فيما أخذتم عذاب عظيم فكلوا مما غنمتم حلالا طيبا واتقوا الله إن الله غفور رحيم يا أيها النبي قل لمن في أيديكم من الأسرى يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتكم خيرا مما أخذ منكم ويغفر لكم والله غفور رحيم وإن يريدوا خيانتك فقد خانوا الله من قبل فأمكن منهم والله عليم حكيم إن الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك بعضهم أولياء بعض والذين آمنوا ولم يهاجروا ما لكم من ولايتهم من شيء حتى يهاجروا وإن استنصروكم في الدين فعليكم النصر إلا على قوم بينكم وبينهم ميثاق والله بما تعملون بصير والذين كفروا بعضهم أولياء بعض إلا تفعلوه تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد كبير والذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم والذين آمنوا من بعد وهاجروا وجاهدوا معكم فأولئك منكم وأولو الأرحام بعضهم أولى ببعض في كتاب الله، إن الله بكل شيء عليم. براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين فسيحوا في الأرض 4 أشهر واعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وأن الله مخزي الكافرين. وأذان من الله ورسوله إلى الناس يوم الحج الأكبر أن الله بريء من المشركين ورسوله، فإن تبتم فهو خير لكم، وإن توليتم فاعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله، وبشر الذين كفروا بعذاب أليم. إلا الذين عاهدتم من المشركين ثم لم ينقصوكم شيئا ولم يظاهروا عليكم أحدا فأتموا إليهم عهدهم إلى مدتهم إن الله يحب المتقين. فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم وخذوهم واحصروهم واقعدوا لهم كل مرصد، فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فخلوا سبيلهم إن الله غفور رحيم. وإن أحد من المشركين استجارك فأجره حتى يسمع كلام الله ثم أبلغه مأمنه، ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يعلمون. كيف يكون للمشركين عهد عند الله وعند رسوله إلا الذين عاهدتم عند المسجد الحرام، فما استقاموا لكم فاستقيموا لهم إن الله يحب المتقين. كيف وإن يظهروا عليكم لا يرقبوا فيكم إلا ولا ذمة يرضونكم بأفواههم وتأبى قلوبهم وأكثرهم فاسقون. اشتروا بآيات الله ثمنا قليلا فصدوا عن سبيله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون. لا يرقبون في مؤمن إلا ولا ذمة وأولئك هم المعتدون. فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فإخوانكم في الدين ونفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. وإن نكثوا أيمانهم من بعد عهدهم وطعنوا في دينكم فقاتلوا أئمة الكفر إنهم لا أيمان لهم لعلهم ينتهون. ألا تقاتلون قوما نكثوا أيمانهم وهموا بإخراج الرسول وهم بدأوكم أول مرة أتخشونهم فالله أحق أن تخشوه إن كنتم مؤمنين. قاتلوهم يعذبهم الله بأيديكم ويخزهم وينصركم عليهم ويشف صدور قوم مؤمنين ويذهب غيظ قلوبهم ويتوب الله على من يشاء والله عليم حكيم. أم حسبتم أن تتركوا ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ولم يتخذوا من دون الله ولا رسوله ولا المؤمنين وليجة والله خبير بما تعملون. ما كان للمشركين أن يعمروا مساجد الله شاهدين على أنفسهم بالكفر أولئك حبطت أعمالهم وفي النار هم خالدون. إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين. أجعلتم سقاية الحاج الحج وعمارة المسجد الحرام كمن آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وجاهد في سبيل الله لا يستوون عند الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم أعظم درجة عند الله وأولئك هم الفائزون يبشرهم ربهم برحمة منه ورضوان وجنات لهم فيها نعيم مقيم خالدين فيها أبدا إن الله عنده أجر عظيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا آباءكم وإخوانكم أولياء إن استحبوا الكفر على الإيمان ومن يتولهم منكم فأولئك هم الظالمون قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين لقد نصركم الله في مواطن كثيرة ويوم حنين إذ أعجبتكم كثرتكم فلم تغن عنكم شيئا وضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت ثم وليتم مدبرين ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين وأنزل جنودا لم تروها وعذب الذين كفروا وذلك جزاء الكافرين ثم يتوب الله من بعد ذلك على من يشاء والله غفور رحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما المشركون نجس فلا يقربوا المسجد الحرام بعد عامهم هذا وإن خفتم عيلة فسوف يغنيكم الله من فضله إن شاء إن الله عليم حكيم قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يحرمون ما حرم الله ورسوله ولا يدينون دين الحق من الذين أوتوا الكتاب حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون وقالت اليهود عزير بن الله وقالت النصارى المسيح ابن الله ذلك قولهم بأفواههم يضاهئون قول الذين كفروا من قبل قاتلهم الله أنى يؤفكون اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا إلها واحدا لا إله إلا هو سبحانه عما يشركون يريدون أن يطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم ويأبى الله إلا أن يتم نوره ولو كره الكافرون هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن كثيرا من الأحبار والرهبان ليأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل ويصدون عن سبيل الله والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم يوم يحمى عليها في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون إن عدة الشهور عند الله 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها 4 حرم ذلك الدين القيم فلا تظلموا فيهن أنفسكم وقاتلوا المشركين كافة كما يقاتلونكم كافة واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين إنما النسيء زيادة في الكفر يضل به الذين كفروا يحلونه عاما ويحرمونه عاما ليواطئوا عدة ما حرم الله فيحلوا ما حرم الله زين لهم سوء أعمالهم والله لا يهدي القوم الكافرين يا أيها الذين آمنوا ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله اثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة فما متاع الحياة الدنيا في الآخرة إلا قليل إلا تنفروا يعذبكم عذابا أليما ويستبدل قوما غيركم ولا تضروه شيئا والله على كل شيء قدير إلا تنصروه فقد نصره الله إذ أخرجه الذين كفروا ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار إذ يقول لصاحبه لا تحزن إن الله معنا فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لم تروها وجعل كلمة الذين كفروا السفلى وكلمة الله هي العليا والله عزيز حكيم انفروا خفافا وثقالا وجاهدوا بأموالكم وأنفسكم في سبيل الله ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون لو كان عرضا قريبا وسفرا قاصدا لاتبعوك ولكن بعدت عليهم الشقة وسيحلفون بالله لو استطعنا لخرجنا معكم يهلكون أنفسهم والله يعلم إنهم لكاذبون عفى الله عنك لما أذنت لهم حتى يتبين لك الذين صدقوا وتعلم الكاذبين لا يستأذنك الذين يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم والله عليم بالمتقين إنما يستأذنك الذين لا يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر وارتابت قلوبهم فهم في ريبهم يترددون ولو أرادوا الخروج لأعدوا له عدة ولكن كره الله بعاثهم فثبطهم وقيل اقعدوا مع القاعدين ولو أرادوا الخروج لأعدوا له عدة ولكن كره الله بعاثهم فثبطهم وقيل اقعدوا مع القاعدين لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا ولا أوضعوا خلالكم يبغونكم الفتنة وفيكم سماعون لهم والله عليم بالظالمين لقد ابتغوا الفتنة من قبل وقلبوا لك الأمور حتى جاء الحق وظهر أمر الله وهم كارهون ومنهم من يقول ائذن لي ولا تفتني ألا في الفتنة سقطوا وإن جهنم لمحيطة بالكافرين إن تصبك حسنة تسؤهم وإن تصبك مصيبة يقولوا قد أخذنا أمرنا من قبل ويتولوا وهم فرحون قل لن يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا قل لن يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون قل هل تربصون بنا إلا إحدى الحسنيين ونحن نتربص بكم أن يصيبكم الله بعذاب من عنده أو بأيدينا فتربصوا إنا معكم متربصون قل أنفقوا طوعا أو كرها لن يتقبل منكم إنكم كنتم قوما فاسقين وما منعهم أن تقبل منهم نفقاتهم إلا أنهم كفروا بالله وبرسوله ولا يأتون الصلاة إلا وهم كسالى ولا ينفقون إلا وهم كارهون فلا تعجبك أموالهم ولا أولادهم إنما يريد الله ليعذبهم بها في الحياة الدنيا وتزهق أنفسهم وهم كافرون ويحلفون بالله إنهم لمنكم وما هم منكم ولكنهم قوم يفرقون لو يجدون ملجأ أو مغارات أو مدخلا لولوا إليه وهم يجمحون ومنهم من يلمزك في الصدقات فإن أعطوا منها رضوا وإن لم يعطوا منها إذا هم يسخطون ولو أنهم رضوا ما آتاهم الله ورسوله وقالوا حسبنا الله سيؤتينا الله من فضله ورسوله إنا إلى الله راغبون إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم ومنهم الذين يؤذون النبي ويقولون هو أذن قل أذن خير لكم يؤمن بالله ويؤمن للمؤمنين ورحمة للذين آمنوا منكم والذين يؤذون رسول الله لهم عذاب أليم يحلفون بالله لكم ليرضوكم والله ورسوله أحق أن يرضوه إن كانوا مؤمنين ألم يعلموا أنه من يحادد الله ورسوله فأن له نار جهنم خالدا فيها ذلك الخزي العظيم يحذر المنافقون أن تنزل عليهم سورة تنبئهم بما في قلوبهم قل استهزئوا إن الله مخرج ما تحذرون ولئن سألتهم ليقولن إنما كنا نخوض ونلعب قل أبالله وآياته ورسوله كنتم تستهزئون لا تعتذروا قد كفرتم بعد إيمانكم إن نعف عن طائفة منكم نعذب طائفة بأنهم كانوا مجرمين المنافقون والمنافقات بعضهم من بعض يأمرون بالمنكر وينهون عن المعروف ويقبضون أيديهم نسوا الله فنسيهم إن المنافقين هم الفاسقون وعد الله المنافقين والمنافقات والكفار نار جهنم خالدين فيها هي حسبهم ولعنهم الله ولهم عذاب مقيم كالذين من قبلكم كانوا أشد منكم قوة وأكثر أموالا وأولادا فاستمتعوا بخلاقهم فاستمتعتم بخلاقكم كما استمتع الذين من قبلكم بخلاقهم وخضتم كالذي خاضوا أولئك حبطت أعمالهم في الدنيا والآخرة وأولئك هم الخاسرون ألم يأتهم نبأ الذين من قبلهم قوم نوح وعاد وثمود وقوم إبراهيم وأصحاب مدين والمؤتفكات أتتهم رسلهم بالبينات فما كان الله ليظلمهم ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم وعد الله المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ورضوان من الله أكبر ذلك هو الفوز العظيم يا أيها النبي جاهد الكفار والمنافقين واغلظ عليهم ومأواهم جهنم وبئس المصير يحلفون بالله ما قالوا ولقد قالوا كلمة الكفر وكفروا بعد إسلامهم وهموا بما لم ينالوا وما نقموا إلا أن أغناهم الله ورسوله من فضله فإن يتوبوا يك خيرا لهم وإن يتولوا يعذبهم الله عذابا أليما في الدنيا والآخرة وما لهم في الأرض من ولي ولا نصير ومنهم من عاهد الله لئن آتانا من فضله لنصدقن ولنكونن من الصالحين فلما آتاهم من فضله بخلوا به وتولوا وهم معرضون فأعقبهم نفاقا في قلوبهم إلى يوم يلقونه بما أخلفوا الله ما وعدوه وبما كانوا يكذبون ألم يعلموا أن الله يعلم سرهم ونجواهم وأن الله علام الغيوب الذين يلمزون المطوعين من المؤمنين في الصدقات والذين لا يجدون إلا جهدهم فيسخرون منهم سخر الله منهم ولهم عذاب أليم استغفر لهم أو لا تستغفر لهم إن تستغفر لهم 70 مرة فلن يغفر الله لهم ذلك بأنهم كفروا بالله ورسوله والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. فرح المخلفون بمقعدهم خلاف رسول الله وكرهوا أن يجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله وقالوا لا تنفروا في الحر قل نار جهنم أشد حرا لو كانوا يفقهون فليضحكوا قليلا وليبكوا كثيرا جزاء بما كانوا يكسبون. فإن رجعك الله إلى طائفة منهم فاستأذنوك للخروج فقل لن تخرجوا معي أبدا ولن تقاتلوا معي عدوا إنكم رضيتم بالقعود أول مرة فقعدوا مع الخالفين. ولا تصل على أحد منهم مات أبدا ولا تقم على قبره إنهم كفروا بالله ورسوله وماتوا وهم فاسقون. ولا تعجبك أموالهم وأولادهم إنما يريد الله أن يعذبهم بها في الدنيا وتزهق أنفسهم وهم كافرون. وإذا أنزلت سورة أن آمنوا بالله وجاهدوا مع رسوله استأذنك أولو الطول منهم وقالوا ذرنا نكن مع القاعدين رضوا بأن يكونوا مع الخوالف وطبع على قلوبهم فهم لا يفقهون. لكن الرسول والذين آمنوا معه جاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم وأولئك لهم الخيرات وأولئك هم المفلحون. أعد الله لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ذلك الفوز العظيم. وجاء المعذرون من الأعراب ليؤذن لهم وقعد الذين كذبوا الله ورسوله سيصيب الذين كفروا منهم عذاب أليم. ليس على الضعفاء ولا على المرضى ولا على الذين لا يجدون ما ينفقون حرج إذا نصحوا لله ورسوله ما على المحسنين من سبيل والله غفور رحيم. ولا على الذين إذا ما أتوك لتحملهم قلت لا أجد ما أحملكم عليه تولوا وأعينهم تفيض من الدمع حزنا ألا يجدوا ما ينفقون إنما السبيل على الذين يستأذنونك وهم أغنياء رضوا بأن يكونوا مع الخوالف وطبع الله على قلوبهم فهم لا يعلمون. جزاكم الله خيرا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's good to see everyone in our Islamic Center Virginia community this evening. We're reading the 10th juz, 10th section of the Holy Quran. Alhamdulillah, this is the 1/3 way through the Quran and 1/3 of the way through the month of Ramadan tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah Almighty make it easy for all of us, and accept from us and bless us in this holy month and in the Quran. This evening, we are continuing from Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8, and we're then going to be beginning the first part of Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9 of the Holy Quran. These two surahs really go together. They're both Medina surahs, but Al-Anfal is earlier. Anfal is talking about the incidents of the Battle of Badr, which took place in the second year of the Hijrah, and it's going into a lot of details of the story. And then chapter 9 is at the year 9 approximately, in the last part of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, up into and including Tabuk. And so where we're at now, chapter 8, verses 41 through 75, and chapter 9, verses 1 through 92, inshallah. And so this section begins, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ. Know that whatever you seize in the battlefield or in the war, 1/5 part belongs to God and to the messenger. And then it goes on, وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. And for the near of kin, the orphans, the needy, and the wayfarer. إِن كُنتُمْ آمَنْتُمْ بِاللَّهِ وَمَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا يَوْمَ الْفُرْقَانِ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ. If you truly believe in God and in what we have revealed from on high upon our servant on the day of the criterion, the day of the Furqan, when the clear separation between good and evil, right and wrong, when the two forces met each other on that day. And so the day of the Furqan is the day in which falsehood was clearly exposed and truth was clearly manifested, and which side was true and which side was false. And so, as we have already talked about, that took place on the 17th day of Ramadan in the second year after the migration to Al-Medina. And this was such a spectacular and important event because you have to realize the desperate condition of these poor refugees who had lost everything only because of their faith. They were persecuted and killed and driven out. And so this made it very clear that those people who stood for the use of power to force their beliefs on other people and to use it indiscriminately against men, women, and children, they were clearly exposed. And now it tells us somehow how this happened and the sort of the spiritual power behind it, because we can look at it as simply a battle. But in fact, like most of the battles in that time, it was extremely small. On the side of the Muslim, barely a little over 300 people. And on the other side, a well-equipped army, but 1,000 people. These are very small. And of course, you can study it from a point of view of military strategy. But in fact, the spiritual battle that was taking place here makes it a divine revelation and teaching. That's why Allah said that the people who believe are the ones who believe in the message that was revealed on that day to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. And so it says, you, that is the Muslim forces, is antum, plural. So all of them were bil'udwati, ad-dunya, that is in the near end, the lower end of the valley of Badr. Wahum bil'udwati al-quswa, they were in the far end of the valley. And warakibu asfala minkum, while the caravan was far below you. And so here is the interesting story, which the Muslims, knowing that they're a small group, had no desire to engage in a great war or great battle with a far superior force that was well equipped by Abu Sufyan, the leader of the forces of Mecca. But they did know about the caravan, and they had hoped that they could intercept that caravan because these were people who had been dispossessed. Their homes had been taken from them and all of their wealth. And they were hoping that they could be compensated in that way. But that is not what Allah Almighty wanted. So they could see far below the caravan going free on its way to Mecca with all of its treasure and wealth. And so Abu Sufyan was getting all the money he needed to pay for this and for any future battles and invasions that were necessary for him to defeat this small Muslim group. And who did they meet instead but the well-equipped army that had been prepared for them on the other end of the valley? And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, chose a different position. But when they saw that, in fact, the well, the source of water, was between the lines, they told him, let's stay in this particular position here at this end of the valley so that we have the well behind us. And of course, that's what they did. And that was a very good strategic decision. But everything that happened in this day actually happened by the will of Allah, and there was divine revelation and signs and teaching, not simply strategic maneuvers that you could study in military school. And so Allah said, if you had known that a battle was going to take place, you would have indeed refused to accept the challenge. And so the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, didn't want some kind of a suicide charge. He always thought of the best to take care of his companions and to protect them. And his idea of using force was that a force was a deterrence. The willingness that you would to defend yourself was the best way to prevent bloodshed. And he demonstrated that again and again in the choices he made in the coming years. Alayhi salatu wasalam. ولكن ليقضي الله أمرا كان مفعولا. But it was so that God might accomplish a thing that he had willed to be done already. So Allah already knew what he wanted to take place. And so the Prophet Muhammad may have wanted one thing, and the Sahaba may have wanted something, but it was the will of Allah. And what Allah wanted, لِيَحْلِكَ مَنْ هَلَكَ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ, that the people who will be destroyed or who will perish clearly and visibly as clear evidence of the truth. That is, if the forces had been more even, if the Muslim had been well armed, if they had had mounts, if they had had a time to plan, then it could have looked like a strategic success based on great generalship and great leadership, but that was not the case. وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ, and that he who remained alive, those who were saved, might live in clear evidence of the truth. And so this, what actually happened is a revelation from God and a sign, not simply a battle. So Allah Almighty showed them, or showed the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, in a vision. He showed him a vision that there were a few people they would be meeting, a small group. Because if Allah Almighty had shown their real number, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, if he had known, probably his people would have lost heart. They would have given up hope. And they would have started to argue with each other and dispute with each other. And then they would have lost the spirit. So instead, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ سَلَّمَ إِنَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. But Allah saved you from this. So by not being prepared You didn't have time to start dividing and separating in your different opinions, and then you are not happy with each other, and you're not fully united and prepared. So Allah had full knowledge of what was going to happen. So when then you met in the battle, you were made to look at the forces of the enemy, and from far away they didn't appear that great, and in fact you looked down on them and you felt that they were not nearly as many as they turned out to be, and so you were more positive and went forward in a more bold manner than if you really had an idea of what was prepared for you. And indeed, Allah Almighty also made your group seem insignificant to them. They simply looked at the number. We're more than 3 times their number. We're much better provided for. We have a full cavalry. We have full weapons and armor, etc., etc. لِيَقْضِيَ اللَّهُ أَمْرًا كَانَ مَفْعُولًا. Once again, because Allah Almighty wants to accomplish His plan that He had already decreed, and so it is the will of Allah that shall be done. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورُ. And so everything is going back to Allah Almighty for a decision. And so Allah said, if you have faith, if you have a strong faith, then go forward and be firm and make dhikr, remembering Allah Ta'ala. They didn't shout and yell like you see nowadays, Allahu Akbar, shouting loudly, because Allah Almighty is near to them. They feel close to Allah, and Allah hears them. They don't need to shout. They would simply make dhikr quietly in their heart or quietly in a low voice and remember Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Almighty gave them confidence that whatever happened, they are close to their Lord and they will return unto their Lord. And obey Allah and obey His Messenger, and don't become divided and argue with each other so that you will lose heart. You will lose your moral strength by always fighting among yourselves. And then just be patient. Wasbiru inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Allah is with those who are patient in adversity. And so He said, do not be like those people who came out of Mecca fully conceited. They're celebrating. They're so proud of themselves, and they only want to be seen of people and be praised by people and show off their strength and their honor in front of humanity. But Shaitan appeared to them, and they saw that he was a leader or chieftain, and he came and said, I am with you. But then when he saw the forces of the angels, he said, oh, I see that which you do not see. And he abandoned them. And by doing that, that helped them to lose heart. And at the same time, the hypocrites, the munafiqun, who pretended that they were Muslims, but really didn't believe in the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, they were saying, oh, you know, those poor Muslims, they're deluded by their faith. But Allah Almighty promised them a great chastisement. When death does come to them, even in their beds, it will be a battle for them where they will resist the angels, and the angels will seize their souls with violence and anger at that time. And so even though they may escape from this life, from having to participate in such a battle, they will not escape from Allah Ta'ala. And so Allah Almighty changes the condition of people because they lose their heart. They lose heart and they lose faith. They lose the moral high ground, and then they sink down into a lower condition and no longer have a divine protection and help. Those people who violated their treaties, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, was commanded by Allah for those hypocrites to make an example of them. But because if they have joined forces with the enemy army and made an alliance with them to fight and kill innocent people. But then Allah Almighty said, if they seek peace and they want to live in peace, when janahu lis-salami fajnah laha وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. So then trust in Allah and make peace with them. Even if they later betray you, Allah Almighty is going to make sure they get what is coming to them, inshallah. And so Allah is sufficient for us. We don't have to worry, inshallah. So people say, oh, you can't make a treaty with those people. We don't trust them. But sometimes it's better to make a treaty with people. Maybe before they were fooled and they thought they were on the right side. Now they're going to make a treaty. And if they do betray you, don't worry. Allah Almighty has put the fear in their hearts. And they are soon enough going to think twice before they betray you, inshallah. And if they do, Allah will be enough to protect you, inshallah. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, had something they did not have. He had the Muhajirin who had been with him in Mecca and the Ansar of Medina who had welcomed them. And although they were different tribes, different races, and national groups, they were united by faith, and Allah Almighty united their hearts, knitted their hearts together. أَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. And Allah said here, if you had spent all the money in the world, you could never have united their heart. And then if you had paid them to make peace with one another, they would never have done, because their pride would not have allowed them to. It was only their faith in God and their faith in the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, that caused them to be united. And so Allah said, because of your great faith, you could fight, if 20 of you could overcome 200, you could fight 10-to-1 odds because of your great faith. But Allah Almighty knows that human beings are very weak. And so in reality, 2 against 1 would be good enough odds for you. 1,000 of you could beat 2,000 of them because of your strong faith, inshallah. In the last part of this chapter, other things dealing with wartime situations. And one thing was slave raiding, that people used to raid enemy communities to seize non-combatants, to seize men, women, and children into slavery. And this is not allowed in Islam at all. But Allah said, مَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَكُونَ لَهُ أَسْرَى حَتَّى يُثْخِنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ تُرِيدُونَ عَرْضَ الدُّنْيَا وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةَ. It is not appropriate that a prophet should keep captives unless he has strenuously battled in the land. You may desire the temporary gains of this world, but God desires for you the good of the life to come. So no person can be taken and their freedom removed from them unless they were guilty of a crime or they were taken as a prisoner of war. And if they are a prisoner of war, then they have to be given a chance to their freedom after the war ends. As Allah Almighty told us, when you seize them for darabu riqab, and you defeat them, inshallah, after you defeat them, fashaddu al-wathaq, then tighten their bonds. But then thereafter, either out of your mercy and grace, or in exchange for ransom, free them, so that the burden of war may be lifted. And so Allah Almighty gave an opportunity that those people, when they are in captivity, they should be given the same clothing and the same food as their captors. If they have to work, they have to work what is reasonable number of hours and a reasonable amount of labor. And they have to, if they are not ransomed or freed, then they have to be given a chance to work off and earn their freedom in exchange for their good behavior and working off. And so there's no idea in Islam that people should be chattel slaves and they and their descendants for generations should be held in perpetual servitude and bondage. But in fact, they should have every opportunity to make a good life and to enjoy the freedom. And Allah Almighty has created the human beings as equals. None is superior to any other. Chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah, is the only chapter of the Quran that does not begin with the Basmalah, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. And some people think it's because it's simply a continuation of this chapter. revealed at another time. But of course, it's actually a surah of the Quran. It's its own independent surah of the Quran. But it's starting with a statement, and it's sort of like it's a revelation of Allah, of a revealed statement or official decree. And this took place at the pilgrimage after the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, liberated Mecca from occupation by the forces of idolatry and ignorance. He made sure that it was almost blood-free. He forbade anyone to kill anyone without a provocation, and he gave everyone safety and security, and he forgave his enemies and made peace. And at that time, mass amounts of people embraced Islam out of their choice, and he gave them the freedom to come and go. But because they have now forsaken those people who did not embrace Islam, many of those tribal groups betrayed their covenant or their peace treaty with Islam. And so this was read in the pilgrimage in the year 9. And this is the pilgrimage that was led by Abu Bakr, and in which also Ali attended. And the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, remained in Medina. And the Prophet went on the pilgrimage before his death in the year 10, the next year. And so they did not go and raid these tribes who had betrayed their treaty and take them by a surprise attack, but they gave them a 4-month warning. Bara'atun min Allahi wa rasulihi ila ladina ahadtum min al-mushrikeen. This is a disavowal by God and his messenger unto those idolaters with whom you have made a covenant or treaty, that you have 4 months to go about freely in the land. And at the expiration of that time, then it's going to be a war against you unless you repent. And so it's specifically directed toward those pagan tribes who have violated their treaties and have attacked and harmed Muslim people in violation of their agreements. And a proclamation from God and his messenger unto all people. Yom al-Hajj al-Akbar, on the day of the great pilgrimage, that is the pilgrimage on the year 9. And Allah bari'um min al-mushrikina wa rasuluh, that Allah and his messenger as well have disavowed the idolaters, and if they repent, it shall be for their own good, but if they turn away and refuse, then they can never elude or escape from God. And then it gives the exception. But those tribes of the idolaters who have kept their treaty, and they have not fought you, and they have not joined in forces with those who have fought you, then complete the treaty with them. Do not violate the treaty. That would be against taqwa and against piety. And Allah loves those people who will observe piety and do the right thing and not violate, of course, their agreements and covenants. And so here is a state of war. And it's very important for us to read these things. It's not really about war. That's just the condition in which it was revealed. But it's giving us the essential Islamic values. And so today people accuse Muslim jihad is associated with extremist groups and violent terrorism. But in these times when it was all-out war taking place, and it was what you would call existential war, that is, the side that lost would probably be wiped out and forgotten about forever. And so it was extremely dangerous, yet the Islamic values come out clearly here. So if any of the idolaters seek, and this is verse 6, any of the idolaters seek to come to Medina, then permit them to come to Medina so that they can stay, give them housing, and let them stay so they can hear the word of Allah. Maybe they may be guided and they may join the forces of Islam. But if they're not guided and they hear the Quran and they hear the teaching of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, then when they want to go, you have to escort them out of Medina to a safe place. So you can't say, oh, you are a member of the enemy, we get to kill you. And so that's what extremist groups do today, and they've always done that. But The Quran does not allow that. Every individual is treated as innocent until proven guilty, and no one can be harmed because of their group in which they are part of. Even in a time of war, you can't do harm to civilians, even if those civilians come to you, as long as they are living at peace, inshallah. Now, the idolaters said that they have a right in the sanctuary of Mecca. They are the people who maintain the sacred sites. And of course, for generations, they had done that, but they considered themselves superior to every other human being, and they were God's chosen people. And so it was a great pride that they were the ones who maintained the holy mosque of Mecca. But Allah Almighty said, ما كان للمشركين أن يعمروا مساجد الله شاهدين على أنفسهم بالكفر. It is not appropriate that idolaters, those who commit shirk, who worship others besides God, should maintain God's houses of worship while their hearts bear witness against them of kufr, of their rejection of God. إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر. The only ones who have the right to visit and maintain these sacred mosques are those who believe in God and in the last day. They believe in the resurrection and life in the world to come. وَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَى الزَّكَاةَ. They do their prayer and they give in charity. وَلَمْ يَخْشَى إِلَّا اللَّهَ. And they fear none except God alone. And so you often hear this recited. In fact, here in the Islamic Center, that's over the door going into the sanctuary or prayer area of the Islamic Center. And it's really about that mosques, ya'muru means that you build, maintain, and bring life to, and make the mosque a living place. The mosque is alive because it's being used for prayer, worship, charity, education, and people are visiting it and they are caring for the mosque, keeping its upkeep and its appearance, making it wide enough and expansive enough to care for the entire community, inshallah, and to serve the community in the best way. And that's only proper when you have faith in Allah Ta'ala. Otherwise, if you are doing those things, and you reject God, then you are giving a witness against yourself. The next thing that is mentioned in this chapter happened immediately after the conquest of Mecca. And so, as we said, several thousand people immediately after the Mecca was returned to the fold of Islam entered into the religion of Allah Ta'ala. And now they march forth to fight some of the other tribes of idolaters in Hunayn. And especially these new converts, and there were thousands of people who'd converted in the last couple of years. And so the numbers of Muslims between the Battle of Badr, which was 300, and then in the Fath Makkah, it was 10,000. And now these large numbers of people are going to the valley of Hunayn. And they were so excited. They say, oh, Allah is always going to make us win. And they were very proud, similar to the way that the idolaters were very proud and thought their numbers were going to always make them win, or that God was always going to be on their side. And so they were easily ambushed from above the valley. They were marching straight through. There were big rocks above them, and they were hiding their archers up there. And so it was really an ambush. And a lot of these people were of very weak faith, and they had more interest in seizing booty. And of course, we already heard about in the last chapter that is not legitimate in Islam to simply seize booty, but it has to be distributed in a correct way by the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. And so whatever is seized, that will go into the government coffers. It will be used to ransom. It will be returned, if they will make peace, returned back to them. And otherwise, 1/5 goes in charity, and the other 4/5 would go to help those people who had paid out of their own pocket to go forth in the battle. And so Allah said, we gave you victory in many battlefields, and on the day of Hunayn, when the pride of your great numbers were of no help to you, no avail to you, you were so proud of yourself. But despite all this, despite the world, the vastness of the land, it seemed very narrow and constricted to you because of your fear of the enemy when you were in surprise. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood firm, and a few of his close companions around him, and Allah sent the Sakina, divine peace, the inner peace in the heart, upon his messenger and the true faithful. And he supported them once again with the invisible forces, angelic forces, to give them strength and support. And although these people, of course, eventually the Muslims were successful and they did win the day, Allah said, whomever of those people, if they will repent, Allah Almighty will forgive them, inshallah ta'ala. And so from this day forward, the unbelievers after the 4-month period will not be allowed to go back to Mecca, performing the pilgrimage in the name of different gods and idols, some of them doing so in the nude, offering sacrifices that were repugnant to God of haram material. And so from that day forward, the pilgrimage to Mecca is only for people who believe in the oneness of God and all of the prophets of God, and in the day of judgment and the resurrection. Now, I want to get to shortly here, verse 30. And verse 30 is a controversial verse. Some people call that the verse of the sword, and it's no such thing. But it says, قَاتِلَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَلَا يُحَرِّمُونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَلَا يَدِينُونَ دِينَ الْحَقِّ مِنْ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ. To fight and to strive against those who had previously received the book, have rejected God, do not believe in God and the last day, and do not forbid that which has been forbidden by God and the messenger, and do not follow the religion of truth, hatta yu'tu jizya, until they pay the jizya, when they have an yadin wa hum saghirun, they pay it willingly after they have been defeated and humiliated in battle. And so this looks like to people, oh, the Muslims want to kill Christians. And of course, you can go online and people say Muslims want to kill Christians and they want to kill Jews, et cetera, et cetera. And that is not the case at all. But in fact, at this time, Christian and Jewish groups, without fighting and without doing anything, willingly made peace with the Muslims and paid the jizya, which is a tax. The Muslims paid the zakat, and they paid the humus, the fifth part that had been talked about in the last chapter, and these groups paid a different amount of money, or what was be called the head tax, and they were excused from participating in a battle, joining the military, etc., and were given all rights of freedom of religion. And it talks about some of their beliefs. That the Jewish group among the Arabs who believed in Uzair, the so-called Ezra, the son of God, and the Christian who believed that Christ was the son of God. And Allah Almighty says to them that these words are similar. يُضَاهِئُونَ قَوْلَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَبْلِ. They follow in spirit the claims made in earlier times by people who rejected the faith. And so their claim that so-and-so is the son of God or is God in the flesh, they may not take it literally. It may be just al-ghulu, or excessive veneration, excessive reverence for their prophets like Uzair or like Christ. But the words they know very well are similar to the words used by pagans in former times, in ancient times, that their emperors and kings were gods and the sons of God. And so it was not appropriate terms to be used by people who believed in the Abrahamic monotheism. Now, who were the people who were fighting at this time who were Christians or Jews? The people who had been Jewish tribes already had been defeated. There was no Jewish army fighting against the Muslims at this time. They all, at this point, had peace treaties that they were trying to keep and that the Muslims were keeping. And the Christians of Arabia had peace treaties. But the Roman Empire, at that time, today we call that Byzantium, but it was the Roman Empire, and it controlled almost all of Europe, East Europe, even Italy, Turkey, Asia Minor, the Holy Land, and into North Africa. And so it was at that time, its capital was Constantinople, which is modern Istanbul. And they were forcing people to convert to Christianity. They were persecuting and killing other Christians who didn't believe the king's religion or his sect of Christianity. And those tribes, Arab tribes in the north of Arabia who had converted to Islam, they forced them to recant and to return back to the church. And so those were the people whom were being referred to in these verses that they have to be fought in this case. And so this is about the Battle of Tabuk, and the Muslims are going to go and have a show of force so that the people of Arabia could be free to return back to the religion of Islam if that was their choice. And that's what is going to take place in the 9th year after the migration to Al-Medina. And so that is what is being referred to in these into these verses. And here it said a couple of points that I will make, that they took their rabbis and priests as lords besides Allah. And so one of the Christian Arabs who converted to Islam, Adi ibn Hatim, said, they didn't used to worship the rabbis or the monks or the priests, but the Prophet clarified the meaning of these verses, peace be upon him, that when they give them permission to do something forbidden, then they consider that's okay and they do it. And if something is permitted and they forbid it to the people and the people consider it forbidden. And so we have to take our guidance from God Almighty and from the messenger, not from the official priesthood or official authorities, if they are not basing that on strong evidence from the scriptures, from the word of Allah Ta'ala. At this time as well, the Prophet reiterated that the calendar is a lunar calendar of 12 months. The Arabs had what is called a Nasi. A Nasi was the intercalary month. It was a 13th month that would be added to every 2 or 3 years onto the calendar to keep it into the seasons. But they would exploit that so that in the time of the sacred months in the pilgrimage, the months after Ramadan, the 10th, 11th, and 12th month, and then the first month, Muharram, those are the months of pilgrimage, and it is forbidden to fight your enemy and to get vengeance against your enemy there at that time. So they would announce during the pilgrimage, suddenly, they would manipulate the calendar, announce the Nasiya, or the extra month, which was not a sacred month, so that they could then capture their enemies or get vengeance against their enemies. So they exploited that. And so the Islamic calendar was returned to a pure lunar calendar. It's not associated with the seasons of the year. And so all the other calendars are associated with the death of the earth in the winter, symbolizing death. And then the fertilization of the mother earth by the heavens in the spring, and the bringing back of life. And so they would engage in rituals dealing with the fertility of the earth and the cycles of Mother Nature. And that would often be associated with ancient idolatrous practices of appeasing the different natural spirits and gods. So all that was eliminated so that our Islamic observances are not associated with any particular seasons of the year or any cycle of the natural earth in the Northern Hemisphere or Southern Hemisphere or East and West or anywhere else. And so Allah Almighty is calling us to support the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. And nowadays you are thousands of people, yet sometimes you are weak and hesitant and you fail to answer the call. So while you're being called to go north to Tabuk, which is the border between Syria, Palestine, Jordan today, and Arabia, and you're afraid of the Roman Empire, you're chickening out, even though you are tens of thousands. And Allah is promising that if you will support the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, Allah will support you. He supported him when there were only two, only the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, and Abu Bakr in the cave. And at any point, they could have been exposed and murdered. But Allah Almighty protected them and hid them from those who were searching for them. And they successfully made the migration, the hijrah to Mecca, to Medina, which is the year 1 in our calendar. And since that time, from 2 weak, unarmed individuals to tens of thousands, why would you then not answer the call and support the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him? He raised up the word of Allah and he lowered the rejection of Allah and idolatry. And so the end of this section is contrasting that the hypocrites make every excuse not to put themselves in any danger or risk. They only want to claim that they believe, but they don't want to put it into practice. While people of true faith will never make up phony excuses. But Allah gives them excuse if they're elderly, or they're infirm, if they need medical care, or if they're ill, or if they're too poor and they can't afford to do something. Everything in Islam, we're given ease. Anything, even eating what is not halal, or consuming that which is not a halal, if you are in danger of your life or your health, it's allowed. So Allah Almighty makes it easy for us, but that doesn't mean we should manufacture excuses. And so there's a huge contrast between the hijrah of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, with just 2 human beings, them, but with the support of Allah, and now that the Muslims are many in number, but they're arrogant and proud very often, and do not want to and do not trust. Many of them will not actually respond to the call of life of the message of Islam and the message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. May Allah Almighty make us among those who respond to the da'wah, the call of life, and that which is good for us in this life and in the hereafter, and preserve and protect our family and community and ummah. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.